Emily Bender, Professor of Computational Linguistics and co-author of the influential Stochastic Parrots paper, as well as Alex Hanna, who's Director of Research at DAIR, join Jeff and I to discuss why calling everything AI clouds real understanding, how big tech's use of massive language models impacts marginalized communities, and what meaningful accountability looks like in shaping the future of automated systems. That's coming up right after this. This is AI Inside, episode 67, recorded Wednesday, April 28th, 2025, the AI Con. This episode of AI Inside is made possible by our wonderful patrons at patreon.com/AI Inside Show. If you like what you hear, head on over and support us directly, and thank you for making independent podcasting possible. Hello and welcome to AI Inside, the show where we take a look at the AI that is layered throughout so much of the world of technology. I am one of your hosts, Jason Howell. My co-host, Jeff Jarvis, is here as well. He's going to join in a moment for our amazing interview. That's coming up. But first, real quick before we get started, I just want to give a big thank you to those of you who support us directly on Patreon. That's patreon.com/AI Inside Show. Marie Teixeira. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Marie, thank you so much for your support for as long as you have. All right, Jeff and I chatted with Emily Bender and Alex Hanna on Monday, April 28th, 2025. That's when we recorded this interview. And it was super insightful, as you'll soon see, a solid challenge to AI maximalism. So why don't we waste no more time? Let's dive right into the chat right now. All right, I want to welcome to the show two amazing guests first, and actually guests that we've talked about on the show plenty of times before. First, Emily Bender is the professor of computational linguistics at the University of Washington, co-author of a paper that we've talked about many times on the show, the influential Stochastic Parrots paper. Emily, it's nice to have you on the podcast today.
I really appreciate being here. Thank you for having this conversation with us.
Absolutely. And also welcoming Alex Hanna, sociologist, director of research at the Distributed AI Research Institute. Alex, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, you both are here for a very particular reason. Emily and Alex co-authored the new book, The AI Con, which apparently every single one of us has. The
Mine's
AI Con. I believe you. How to fight big tech's hype and create the future we want. It is out May 13th of this year, 2025. And fantastic stuff. Excellent book. I want to start off with something that you lead with in the book, because I think it's a good kind of launch pad. It's something that I've often wondered about, which is the fast and loose usage of the term AI, right? It's thrown around all the time, and it's used to describe almost everything in technology right now. And I'm kind of curious, if we eliminated that phrase entirely, what would be left? What would be the replacement phrase or terminology or something be that would actually describe what these systems are capable of in a more clear sense?
I'm going to jump on this question as a linguist because words are kind of my bailiwick.
Excellent.
It depends on what you're doing, right? If you want to talk about the group of technologies as a whole, then I think the more effective term is automation. And that's going to catch a slightly wider net, but that's okay because the stuff that goes under the AI umbrella wasn't coherent anyway. Or if you're talking about something specific, then you say, well, what is it, right? Are we talking about image generation? Are we talking about some sort of automatic decision system? Are we talking about automatic transcription? Are we talking about the term I like to use for chatbots is conversation simulators? Like, what is the specific thing that you're talking about? So either own that it's automation and talk about sort of issues around automation, or name the specific thing you're working on.
The other word I like that you use in the book is content extruder.
Yes. Well, not content, actually.
Text.
Synthetic text extruding machine. And I sort of shy away from content because content is like what it means, right? But what's coming out of these machines is just the form, and we're the ones who make meaning of it.
Yeah, so but AI is so much shorter. It's so much easier to just say AI. Anyway, sorry, Jeff.
It feeds the hype so much better. So I'm going to extend that question in the next one. But first, I want to start. I'm so thrilled for this conversation. Alex, the work you do at DAIR is so important right now. Dr. Bender, I quoted you a number of times in my last book, The Web We Weave, and I have quoted you in podcasts endlessly. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But you do a great job in the book of skewering the hype. And I think that there's two angles here. There's the hype and there's the misuse of these technologies. So I'd like to get down to a base case, if it exists, of if you strip away the hype and you strip away the bad use using LLMs on search engines and so on and so on, what are the good uses that we should or could be concentrating on? What's left?
So are you interested in good use cases for language modeling or other things that are called AI?
Anything that's called AI.
All right. So I'll start with language modeling, but then pass it over to Dr. Hanna, who I think has other areas that she might be more excited about. But, language models are models of the distributions of word forms and text, and they're an important component of things like automatic transcription and machine translation systems, which need to be used carefully, right? Because with automation, it's going to have a certain error rate, and you're going to be able to tell where that, like what that error rate is, and it's going to vary across contexts. But I have no problem with that kind of automation in general. I'm a little bit concerned about the ways in which it is being done right now with the so-called large language models, because they're sort of bringing in everything. And instead of doing a very clean, input to output, it's like input gets encoded into the vector space, and then we just sort of let the language model go, and it can output lots of stuff that's completely unmotivated in the input. But in general, there are technologies under the AI umbrella, including ones that use language modeling, that I think are fine. And they're about basically translating from one form of language into another form of language.
Let me stay on there for 1 second before we move to the rest of the world with Dr. Hanna. I wonder, what strikes me about the training sets and the use of these large language models is that it creates a concordance of available text, which it strikes me would be useful, and I'm curious for you as a linguist, what other connections and data might come out, not to create text, not to extrude it, but instead for these large data sets that now exist, are there other research opportunities that are being ignored?
I see. So there's a lot of really interesting things you can do with linguistic corpora, but in order to do any science with that, you have to know what's in the corpus, right? And so these absolutely enormous, undocumented, sort of obscure data sets are actually not scientifically interesting.
Got it.
Yeah.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, with regards to thinking about the technology, we could have a lot of hosts of visions of what we could do with language modeling. I mean, backing up in my background, I did some language modeling in my dissertation. I mean, the whole thing was, let's build a classification system that helps us identify articles that mention protest, which is actually super helpful for social movement scholarship. And I mean, I think the main gist of it is thinking about what types of automation are going to be helpful for particular groups and for particular communities, right? And so fast forwarding to the end of the book, maybe jumping all the way to chapter 7, we talk about a few different organizations like Teheku Media that has produced machine translation and automatic speech recognition tools for the Tere Maori language. So using these things, which are then trained on language that has community control with certain access privileges. So there's particular institutions that know what's going into the data, can control how that's being used. Meanwhile, they compared this to OpenAI's Whisper, their automatic speech recognition tool, and effectively this thing was not able to do very well, was not able to do this kind of code switching between Maori and English very well. And we have companies that want to come in and say, like OpenAI or Facebook or Meta, like, why are you, and they typically are going after like African language startups, and they say, why are you doing what you're doing? We've solved this, and they haven't solved this. They're doing a really piss poor job at doing this. I also should ask, can we curse on this podcast?
Sure.
Just don't know if it should be PG to R. Okay, great.
I can bleep the really bad ones out.
Okay, I won't say really bad ones. We'll keep it family friendly here.
It's YouTube friendly is all we care about.
YouTube friendly. Right. Well, with YouTube, you can't curse in the first 30 seconds, right?
Right.
And so they're doing this just absolutely terrible job on this, and these things are not under community control. There's not an ethical process of collecting those data. They're scraped without consent of speakers of those languages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So there are good uses for these types of automation specifically, and language and acoustic models in terms of automatic speech recognition.
Emily, I've quoted also, besides Stochastic Parrots and others of your work, is your Thai library explanation. And you didn't, I don't think, address this in this book.
No, I think that's not included in the book.
Right.
There was a bunch of places where I was going into the weeds on the linguistic issues, and Alex was like, this is maybe a little bit too much. And a small proportion of those ended up as meaty endnotes. And there's some sort of sociology, political economy, meaty endnotes too. But some stuff ended up, on the cutting room floor. And yeah, so the Thai library, National Library of Thailand, in fact, thought experiment did not make it in.
So I wonder if you could share it with our audience, because we're geeky enough here. It's fine.
All right.
And because I think the thing that I harp on again and again and again is how these models have no sense of meaning whatsoever.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a useful curriculum to explain to people this. So I wonder if you could, I could summarize it, but you'll do a better job.
Yeah, happy to. And so actually maybe the purpose of it is exactly what you're saying, that one thing that we know from linguistics is that languages are systems of sign. So there's always the form part and the meaning part. And the form might be marks on the page. It might be sounds from a vocal tract. It might be signs with your hands and your face if it's a signed language. And the meaning part is going to be like dictionary definitions of words, but also sort of like the social connotations of words and also the way those meanings get put together. And the thing about a language model is that it only has access to the form. And the thing about being a competent speaker in a language is that once we've learned the system that maps form to meaning, it's there immediately and we can't turn that off. And so it is very hard to imagine that a language model that exposed to enormous amounts of English text isn't getting the meaning. Because when we see that text, we see the meaning. And so I said, okay, here's a thought experiment. This only applies if you are not a speaker and reader of Thai. And so I have an alternate location, which is, I forget what the official title is, but there's a similar library in the country of Georgia. And Georgian also has a writing system that's unfamiliar to many people who are not already speakers and readers of Georgian. So if you already speak Thai, imagine I'm talking about Georgia instead of Thailand. If you speak both of those, I want to meet you.
Congratulations.
Yes. Incredible polyglot.
Yeah.
You're the person.
So the story is, you are in the National Library of Thailand, and I have come through before you got there and removed every single book that has anything other than Thai script in it. So no mathematical equations, no bilingual dictionaries, no picture books. It's just very large amounts of Thai text. There is somebody who you don't get to talk to, but they arrive 3 times a day with delicious Thai food. So you have sort of unlimited time. You are, well taken care of. And the question is, could you learn Thai? And how would you do it? Right. And there's various things that people say. They say, well, I would go through and I would look for common subsequences. And then I would be able to guess that those common subsequences are maybe words like the or is or things like that, like whatever's going on in Thai and it's like, okay, yes, you could start to get some traction on the grammatical function words that way. It's not going to help you with the content very much. And also that's not something that a language model is doing. Right? Or someone says, I would go through and I would be able to tell that this book is a translation of The Lord of the Rings. And I know that really well. And so I could use that. Okay, same thing. You're bringing in something external that the language model wouldn't be happy with. And then my favorite answer is, I just stick around and enjoy the Thai food.
Does this resonate? I mean, do people start to get it that it just can't, there is no such thing as a wrong answer because there's no such thing as a right answer. It's a prediction of words is all it is. And I just don't think people get that through the hype. That's the problem.
Yeah. I think that when I have a chance to have this conversation with people, it does help some. And, it's also what we're trying to do in the book is we don't do the National Library of Thailand, but we do talk about sort of how these synthetic text extruding machines work and why it is that they are so convincing, because that has to do with how we interpret language. Right? You might think that you interpret language by sort of just unpacking the meaning from the text, but it's not that at all, right? It's this complicated but reflexive process of imagining what the person who chose those words was trying to convey by choosing them. And that's how we do it. That's how we always do it. So when we encounter synthetic text, we do the same thing, and we are therefore imagining a mind behind the text that isn't there.
That's why your field is just so fascinating right now. I was talking to a brilliant student from Syracuse University the other day, and she was saying, I might go to law school, I might go to linguistics. I said, go to linguistics. Great.
Also, linguistics is a fantastic pre-law degree.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's true too. Yes. Alex, I wonder if you could talk for a minute about DAIR. And I want to come back to TESCREAL and all that in a second, but I think to set context of what Timnit Gebru and you and the team at DAIR are doing now and how that fits into this world.
Yeah, absolutely. So DAIR, or the Distributed AI Research Institute, we're a nonprofit research institute that was founded after Dr. Gebru was fired from Google. So it was founded a year after that. And what we our tagline is kind of like AI is not inevitable. So really thinking about community uses of technology. So we kind of operate with two pillars. The first one is thinking about what it means to kind of fight the worst elements of AI. And I think we end up doing that a lot. And the second thing we're really trying to do is think about what it means to have possible tech futures in which we're not focused on building these huge language models or fighting against automated decision-making systems or doing XYZ. And so for the first thing we do, we've had a few projects and thinking about looking at different kinds of harms of AI, in particular harms of, I don't want to say AI and because that, of course, doesn't have much specificity, but thinking about automated decision-making systems, text and media extrusion machines, the ways that we see those harms in the world actually existing. So, for instance, I'm writing a report with a former Amazon driver and a former charter school teacher, Adrian Williams, and we've been working on writing on all the surveillance that in the Amazon trucks through their object and person detection cameras in there, through a system called Netrodyne, as well as this program that folks have to have on their phones or the scanners called Mentor. So we're writing a report on that. We did an interview with several drivers.
Are those the brand names they use? They're so dystopian. Metro.
Yes,
Mentor.
They're very dystopian. So Netrodyne, you could pull it out of the Terminator. What Skynet?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like Skynet, right?
It does.
Yeah, I mean, it's
read the room, people.
Yeah, I know.
How intentional is that? Yes, right, exactly.
Well, you have to. Well, I mean, it's like Palantir and Anduril. These folks are like, they're like, let's use all these, Tolkien terms and not have any kind of reflexivity on them. And so, yeah, I mean.
Sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't.
No. You could write a whole essay about this kind of the dystopianness of naming of quote unquote AI tools. And so these tools are used for surveillance, for doing surveillance of drivers, for worker surveillance. And this is all over different industries like app-based work, gig work, etc. So that's one project. Another project we've been doing that's long running is the data workers inquiry, which my colleagues, Dr. Mila Michelli and Dr. Adia Danica have been working on as coordinators, in which data workers tell their own stories about what it's like working for a contractor of OpenAI or Meta, and having to do this, this psychologically trying, poorly paid work of content moderation or red teaming or some kind of work in the AI pipeline. In terms of the possible future series, I mean, there's different. We did an event last month that was just on, not even that last month. It was earlier this month. It was focusing on trying to think about what new technological futures could be. And some of the things that
I was there. It was very good.
Oh, yes. Great. Wonderful. And so one of the things in one of the sessions, I know there's a piece that to me and Asmanashteka and I wrote on kind of an internet for our grandmothers. So kind of thinking about language technology that could be used by, speakers of what our grandmothers spoke, whether that's kind of like country Egyptian Arabic or Tigrinya or Amharic or Coptic or something of that nature, which really has no kind of access, it's very hard to use the internet in those languages, and the interfaces have to be all keyboards, and there's no keyboards. Or I think Asma, for instance, had to develop a Ge'ez language keyboard with the Ge'ez script, which is has a very different abugida, different from the English or Latin alphabet. And so, so we've been thinking a lot about that. We've been putting energy into different African language startups, trying to think about what it would mean to have alternative to the kind of big tech ecosystem.
Jason, I've been monopolizing. Before I go down the TESCREAL rat hole, do you want to ask?
that is that is a rat hole in and of itself. Yeah, I think in reading through the book, a large focus is this like hype cycle that we're locked into right now around what we're putting in air quotes, the AI tools that exist, and something that's really close to my heart. Because as you can see, I've got some guitars hanging up behind me. I'm a creative person. I create a lot of things, music, video content, you name it, and words on the page. But when it comes to creating something like music, I'm often looking for ways, approaches, tools that help me feel like I'm not quite alone in my own and lost in my own thought process. And so, the collaborative approach is something that I highly value in my creative process. And I think a lot of people take a look at these tools that are coming out, leveraging AI as it's loosely defined, and they see these tools as being a replacement for the human creativity and not necessarily as a collaborator or a possible collaborative tool for the artistic process. And I'm really curious to hear your perspectives on how these systems might not necessarily need to be used in a replacement of human creativity perspective or approach, but how they might actually have some potential using them in a way that's a little more collaborative. And
so I want to take issue with the word collaborative, actually, because that's one of these anthropomorphizing words that makes it sound like the thing on the other side is very human.
Yeah, that's true.
The anthropomorphizing this technology also tends to dehumanize people at the same time. And I think also if you think about using some sort of a remixing system as a way of getting ideas, let's say, if you're collaborating with anybody, it's the people whose work was used to create that system in the first place. And you could imagine a way of doing that actually honors the humanity and creativity and work and effort of those people. There was, I forget their name. There was a person who had a really funny account that was like using language modeling pre-chat GPT to do things like come up with messages for Valentine's Day candy hearts, like feed in a bunch of them and see what comes out. And like that was hilarious. And it was done on the sort of known data set. And so you could imagine a more local community controlled way of saying, yeah, I want to be part of this artistic collective that is contributing to this tool and that we are all benefiting from, for example. But as soon as it is sort of funneled through big tech and not just funneled, but basically stolen by big tech, I just can't get on board with it.
And I would say that there's, somebody that's been helpful to follow is, I don't know if you've seen this person, Ed Newton Rex. He used to work at, I think, Stable Diffusion. Got really fed up with the kind of ways in which and Stable Diffusion, I think, it was either Stable Diffusion or Midjourney. I think it was Stable Diffusion, and was trying to come up with a way to fairly compensate or credit artists, and in a way that would actually respect the ownership and give consent and give sufficient credit. Found that there was no way of doing that, especially under the kind of valuation regime and that Stable Diffusion was trying to chase after. I mean, how they were actually going to turn a profit on this. So he ended up founding an organization called Fairly Trained, which has a lot of audio models and supports startups in which either models are certified to have consent, compensation, whatever, or data sets that have done that for artists. And a lot of them are audio in nature, right? But I mean, yeah, just like Emily was saying, I mean, it's the element of control when big tech gets in the mix. They want to try to train the biggest model on everything, or quote unquote everything, without really any kind of respect to what the process of the human is and what the artist is doing. And so, I mean, the thing that was just really flooring to me and really just to me gave the game away is where Sam Altman was pleading with Congress or the courts or whomever would listen, and said, listen, if you don't let us violate copyright, you're going to lose the war with China. How did we, is the mathing? Like, how is this actually working? And so it was just really, it was really indicative.
So let me stay on this for a second before we go down the rat hole. I wrote a syllabus for Stony Brook this fall in AI and creativity, 100-level course, and the spoiler for the students is that the aim of this is to have them examine their own creativity and their own expression, and to understand the tool's relationship to that. But I want to push you on one point in the book, I think, is that there are many people who are intimidated by writing. I'm intimidated by drawing. I can't do it worth a damn. And on the one level, I think there's an opportunity for people to be able to use these tools to help them do what they want to do. Now, when I talked about this at the executive program I started at CUNY, two of the students, one who ran a site for imprisoned people, one who ran a site for First Nations in Canada, said, "Whoa, white man, you should not want to homogenize the distinct voices of people according to what the AI comes out with." Stipulated, Your Honor, I agree. But I wonder whether those of us who feel fluent in certain media are exclusionary. And so the one thing from the book is Julianne Dawson, who you quote on page 105, said that people who use AI, the problem with people with, I'll start over. The problem with AI is the people who use AI. They don't respect the written word, she told 404. These are people who think their ideas are more important than the actual craft of writing. So as a writer, I get that. I'm a writer. And for me, writing is never easy, but it's what I do. But for those for whom it is not, who want to express an idea, who want to express their lived experience, who want to express themselves, if they find these tools able to do that with them under their control, is there so much wrong with that? Is it when photography came along, engravers got pissed off, and when iPhones came along, photographers got pissed off. But we all had the ability to take photos and record things in ways that we couldn't before because we didn't have the equipment and expertise. And so, sorry, it's a very long-winded Joe Scarborough-like question.
I think the context of that quote is really important. Mm-hmm. And who is Julianne Dawson? She's the founder and creator of Bards and Sages, which is a publisher of speculative fiction that had to close because they were getting snowed under by people who were throwing AI slop at them, mm-hmm. Synthetic text. So in that context, yeah, I think that's a totally fair position. That as a publisher, the publisher can say, I don't want any of that. I want stuff where it has been crafted by someone who has taken the time to hone the craft of writing. I think that the sort of, you didn't use the word democratize, but oftentimes people will say this is democratizing art, and I'm glad you didn't. And there's a wonderful counterpoint to that comes from someone named Bertoni on Blue Sky. This was published in Portuguese, and then someone named Ale translates to English. To democratize art is not every person having a cute drawing made in seconds. To democratize art is every person having time and health to learn and make art if they choose to, and mainly to have the means to think and relate introspectively with art. And I think that this also holds for, we think about writing in other contexts, where it's not necessarily artwork, but you are writing for coursework or you're writing emails at work, right? This is something that we learn how to do, and we learn how to do it by doing it. And anytime that somebody turns to a chatbot because they don't feel ready, two things are going on. One is they are missing out on a chance to make some progress with their own skills, but also it means that something else meant that they didn't have the time or possibly health to actually engage in that.
I would also add that I think that, and I mean, just to situate the Julianne Dawson case, I mean, we also talk about the Clarkesworld case, in which Clarkesworld is this sci-fi publisher that was effectively having a DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack, on their submissions. That's the way to look at it, yeah. Yeah, and because it was, and I think had been a platform that also had paid, right? And I mean, so we have this kind of case in which, and we're seeing this in a lot of kind of cases where there's these things where there might be some kind of a small payoff if you are able to get something published. And if you can play the scale game, then that lets you cash out, right? And we're seeing this in a few different places. There was this report on the California community college system, which really upsets me because the California community college system is an excellent system. I live down the street from a community college where I live, and it's effectively there had been these kind of massive registrations of bots, and then they would drop halfway through, and they would try to reap the kind of financial aid that came through. And so That's that one case, but back to the core of your question and thinking about, does it open up doors? And I'm thinking, and I'm thinking back to this thing and thinking with Emily and like, what are these things that prevent people from engaging in this? Is it the time and space? And surely it's the time and space, but it's also thinking about what it means to hone a craft. And people that are, I think, there is a lot of people in the space that are hostile to craft. I mean, there's Mira Murati, who said famously on I think it was at Vanderbilt, like some of these creative jobs shouldn't have existed to begin with, or you have these things, or you have people like, I think it was an exec at one of these audio companies that was like, well, musicians don't like making music, like they just want to have, which is wild. Like, I also, I was guitars in my other room, and I'm not good at it, but like, I like just to tool around, right? And I played saxophone for many years, and so, like people like making music, but I don't think that's who you're talking about, Jeff. Like, I think who you're talking about are, people that want to engage in craft and thinking about that. And I think, like for that, if it actually opens the doors and it isn't built on the back of, thousands, if not millions of people who have their data stolen, I mean, that's probably the difference you have between your iPhones and your or your photographs and your engravings. I'm sure many people are pissed on that, but also, there's elements of kind of like fabrication of cameras and whatnot, which I can't really speak to, but could be a consideration as well. But I mean, is it worth, writing a paragraph and having to use all that energy and doing it on the backs of people who didn't consent to it, whereas you may find a writing coach, or you might find somebody that can guide you as a mentor, and that is going to be a lot more intimate and is going to accelerate your development as an artist in a much deeper way.
We had Lev Manovich in for a conversation from the City University of New York Grad Center, and he is using AI famously for his art. And what we said was interesting was that he likes it when it does something that he thinks is wrong, and he wants to then interrogate that and figure that out. And it makes him see things in a different way, which is an interesting counterintuitive way to see this. Well, I might still try to invite you into the class this fall to tell the students what they should be learning. Let's go down the rat hole.
I would also say that there's interesting ways of doing it that are not so dependent on intense energy usage or kind of, and I mean, people have been doing computational art for many, many years, right? And I was at I was on a panel with Beth Coleman, who teaches at University of Toronto in my old department. And, she has a series on where she uses a lot of generative adversarial models, or GANs, generative adversarial networks. And these things, are much more thinking about remixing existing photography, kind of adjusting hyperparameters and whatnot. It's not eating up, just like data centers full of energy. You can do this locally on your machine, right? And it can be a conversation between yourself and sort of other reference. And then there's a point that Jen Lena makes really well in terms of craft on our fourth episode of our podcast, but we mentioned her in a book. But the idea that art is a community of practice, right? You might want to have a referent it's not going to be free of any kind of community that you're engaging with. You're going to always have a reference, and engaging in that community of practice is a critical feature of it.
So now for the rat hole. We've had Emil Torres. We've had two conversations with Emil Torres, and they're just great in explaining TESCREAL. Though when I try to mention TESCREAL to people, sometimes their eyes do roll over because it's such a complicated, long thing. But I'm really glad you attacked this, because on the one hand, in the book, you attack hype, and Doomerism is a form of hype, as you so well explained, that it's an effort to show people's power and macho and get money and how do we cut through this? I'm very frustrated that journalistic coverage of OpenAI and other companies and Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and all the characters we know who follow these, I think, faux philosophies and the dangers that lie within, reporters just are too lazy or they're too confused to understand what's going on behind, to understand the context here, that the word safety has been ruined. Because they have their definition of safety versus present tense, way future tense, a million years versus present tense, which again, Stochastic Parrots is a great, I think, core paper to call on there. What's the? I mean, you wrote the book, and this is really helpful. But what's the strategy?
What's the strategy?
For trying to cut through and undercut TESCREAL?
Yeah. So I think some of it is, first of all, just like follow the money. So you say, there's some reporters who just aren't somehow doing the job of actually challenging this and situating it. There are others who are literally paid by the money. So Vox has this something called Future Perfect, which as a linguist, I'm very upset at the repurposing of that, which is like the name of a tense.
Yes.
And that is effective altruism money. And that's the EA and the TESCREAL bundle of ideologies. So some of the journalism is actually coming from inside the house, right?
Yes.
Like it is right there. I think another thing is the way in which we see so much tech journalism platforming paper-shaped objects as if they were research. Like I would love to see journalists drawing a really hard distinction between peer-reviewed research and what's effectively company blog posts. And so much of this is coming out and it just completely falls apart as research. And we have a lot of fun with that on the podcast. So the other strategy that I really want Alex to elaborate on is what we call ridicule as praxis.
Yeah, just make fun of it. I mean, it's bullshit. I mean, it's because I think that happened recently with Roko's Basilisk, which if you're I was next to my partner in bed and she was reading last night and she was reading Malcolm Harris's Palo Alto, and I turned and I saw the page and there was the rant in there from Eliezer Dukowski, and the one where he brings up the response to Roko's Basilisk, which is this thought experiment, which is like, oh, like you mentioned, like if you think about this, there's going to be some future, like future robot overlord, and if you are not subservient to it, it's going to torture you and the singularity for all eternity unless you declare. And so the fact that you have mentioned this and it is now in some corpus, you have now given Roko, or I guess the basilisk. I guess it's the basilisk. It's like it's a Frankenstein situation, right? So you're now giving the basilisk this idea. So people online were panning this. They're like, "Oh, tech bros reinvented Pascal's wager," or or they're sad as some future monster daddy, and like reducing it just to how inane this is, right? And so I think that ridicule, is very good. Comparing the suffering of the 7 or 8 billion people in the now compared to the 10 to the 58th people. I looked this up, Emily. You were right.
It was 10 to 58th.
It was 58. It wasn't 40. It was. I looked up. It's a made-up number, right? 54,
what was it ever?
These people that exist, that the future people that are somehow living above the stars and doing space colonization. I mean, it is very absurd on the face of it. I should also say that, and there was some great reporting in Semaphore yesterday. I don't know if y'all saw this, but it was about the kind of like haunted group chat that Mark Andreessen had started. And it was kind of wild because it has within the group chat this just like the worst people you can think of in Silicon Valley. So it has Joe Lonsdale, co-founder of Palantir, as Balaji Srinivasan, who's the person who's developed this whole ideology of like we're going to have all these network nation states that are just built on artificial islands. And you're like, oh, not only like, of course these people were in some kind of terrible alt-right network. They were in some kind of network but it's just like, oh no, they literally have a group chat in which they're sharing the worst ideas, right? And so I think that's helpful. I mean, that was really helpful reporting insofar as you're like, okay, these
point.
folks are converging, not because they're necessarily all Trumpists or, they're all, because a lot of them weren't, or, not at least to begin, and now they've kind of all fallen in line because you need to make any kind of if they hope to have their industries protected and not be pursued by similar types of antitrust. Although that hasn't really saved Mark Zuckerberg at the moment. But it's that there is this kind of hegemony in this kind of like groupthink, far crypto right that is like. That is very, I mean, it is, if it is not straight up TESCREAL, it is very adjacent. It's knocking on the door.
Well, because it's accelerationist rather than doomerist.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's there together. Talk about your podcast for a minute. Plug your podcast.
Yes, please.
So Mystery AI Hype Theater 3000 is, I like to call it an accidental podcast. So it just started off as a Twitch stream, and we were just going to do it as sort of a one-off takedown of this terrible blog post that ended up taking 3 episodes. And then at that point, we were kind of on a roll, so we kind of kept going. And then eventually we decided it should be a podcast. And it's basically, we look at AI hype across many different domains. Sometimes it's just the two of us. Sometimes we bring in external experts when there's a particular expertise that we want. And, we look straight on at some of the worst stuff and laugh at it.
Yeah, really taking our what is it? What is the story? Meg mentioned this as a Meg Mitchell offered this as a model, Mystery Science Theater 3000, and Emily hadn't seen the show, but I'm a big fan, and I'm like, yes, absolutely. And the original logo for the show was, I think we looked at. It was like a very credulous piece of New York Times reporting, and then I think it was the shadows of Joel Hodgson and Servo and what's the other one named? I don't know. Crow pointing at the screen, going, look at that, ridiculous.
But we decided that maybe we couldn't get away with that, and so we commissioned a fresh logo.
Yeah, when you're defending copyright to go after copyright, it's a problem.
Yeah,
it's a little
yeah. I'm not sure that was fair use. So we actually, have a great logo by Naomi Pleasure Park, and has done all the great assets for the show.
Yeah,
Jason, you want to?
I love it. Well, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about your launch event because I know that's right around the corner, at least as we record this, which is April 28th. So we're recording this a little bit in advance of when it's releasing. But tell us a little bit, we've got the book release coming up. Tell us a little bit about the launch event.
Yeah, for sure. So we are doing a launch event, a virtual launch event with DAIR, and it will be at 2 p.m. on May 8th. And if you want to see all the details about it, you can go to thecon.ai. We have a wonderful interlocutor in Wahini Vara, who recently came out with a book that Emily and I both participated in events with her, and her book is named Searches, and then she's her first book, her novel, her debut novel, was a Pulitzer Prize finalist, and so Wani is a wonderful interlocutor. Really excited to have that conversation with her, and that will be live on our Twitch channel. But it's helpful if folks pre-register at the Eventbrite.
Yeah, so thecon.ai has actually all of our events, and it's Alex's stroke of brilliance that we got that URL.
No kidding.
Yeah, so we have the book launch event is on May 8th. There's a second virtual event on May 12th, and it's 2 p.m. May 8th is 2 p.m. Pacific time for those of us who don't have the luxury of living on the West Coast. Aren't up early all the time. So 2 p.m. May 8th, there's something on May 12th, and then we start doing some in-person events in a few places, and all the details are on that page, thecon.ai.
Excellent.
Good. So at the end of the book, you go through a list of helpful to-dos, everyday resistance, information libraries, meaningful further regulation and transparency and disclosure. I'm leafing through what I read last night. Building socially situated technology, strategic refusal, like earlier. The grimy residue of the AI bubble, which I quite like. What's going to happen to this economy? NVIDIA's, as we speak, NVIDIA's going down because Huawei is doing a competitive chip. So those are your very helpful suggestions. I want to ask you about the one that we keep hearing in this discussion. That, and full disclosure, is or I'll just let you know that I'm dubious about this myself, is this idea of building in guardrails. The idea that you can make these systems to align with human goals. Again, when they have no sense of meaning, how can they have any sense of ethics? Seems to be obvious. Yeah. And then I wrote a book called The Gutenberg Parenthesis, because I'll plug mine too, and I think back to the printing press as a general machine. Anybody could make it do anything, and you couldn't tell Gutenberg, well, you can do this, but just make sure you keep it away from Luther, right? Just see in the future. So there seems to be, as the one hand you have the doomer side, you also have a false comfort in the idea that these alleged, air quotes, safety people at the various companies can build in guardrails and alignment. And that drives me bananas when I hear it. So I'd love to get your arguments against that, because I know you have them. And I seem to fail at trying to get people to latch on to the futility of that. So I've revealed my views clearly.
All right. So you'll notice that in our chapter 7, where we have suggestions of what to do, guardrails aren't among them, right?
Exactly.
We do talk about regulation.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, and there is this thing, and we get into this earlier in the book, about the notion of a general purpose technology. And I think that the difference between something like the printing press, or sometimes people will say electricity is a general purpose technology, but electricity is a natural phenomenon. The technologies of electricity are things like wires and transistors and switches, right? And each of those things has a specific function that it does that you can use in many different ways. Can't talk about the specific function of AI because it's not one thing, but if we drill down into the synthetic text extruding machines, the specific function that they do is continually provide a response to what's a likely next word. Right. So what's that good for? And you're absolutely right that the idea is that we can somehow align its outputs so that the likely next words are likely next words that are good in some generally accepted sense makes no sense at all. Right. It's basically a category error. I think where we do need guardrails is on the activities of corporations. Right. That's laws. That's regulation. And anytime someone is talking about alignment or misalignment, they're basically displacing accountability from the companies that are making decisions, usually based on the profit motive, to this thing that is not the sort of thing that can actually take accountability for anything.
Well, isn't it also true that all right, if they say, yes, you have Anthropic says we're the safe one, and you have I forget who it was who left OpenAI and starting
Ilya Sutskever,
right? Safe superintelligence, right?
Yeah.
So which is a whole bunch of hypey.
I would too like $2 billion, not to build God.
Yeah. Well said. But the companies can't. You see, so we hold them accountable, but we also have to be sensible about what we could hold them accountable to, and recognize what they cannot do, because they act as if they are all powerful, and they are not. So part of the problem, there's so many paradoxes in this world, where in a way we've got to reveal their lack of power.
Right, exactly. So companies can be accountable for data practices. They can be accountable for labor practices, and they could be made accountable for every single output that comes from their machines. If it extrudes something that someone takes as bad medical advice, well, then they're medically liable for that, right? If it extrudes something that ends up being libel, well, then we could get them like.
But I'm saying they couldn't do that. There's no way you could anticipate every possible use.
No, absolutely not.
Right.
We can make them accountable for it. So whatever the machine spits out, the company that set up the machine is accountable for it. That's the kind of thing that we could do with the right political will.
And I would also say that, the notion, there's so many problems with alignment as kind of the idea behind alignment is the kind of pipe dream here is that, well, there's a way in which these things have a certain set of autonomy, and that autonomy of these inevitable machines means that they have to be kind of good independent actors in the world, which is I'm like, well, that's already granting too much credulousness into where these things are going to go, right?
Exactly.
As if these are not programs running on servers, and I think the vision is that someday they're going to be self-replicating or XYZ, and that's just no. This is software. We don't think this about calculators, and we don't think this about image generators or whatnot. I mean, this is software, and people ought to be accountable for when their software goes wrong or does things. And I mean, I think that was a big part of an effort that DAIR was involved in trying to get in the EU AI Act some kind of a accountability mechanism for the providers of people who were creators of LLMs. Basically, like, you cannot say that it's just the facial recognition or the things in hiring, which are high risk. These things are not quote unquote foundational, which is terminology which comes directly from Stanford. I mean, no one was using that term before Stanford HAI was saying it. They are not foundational in any kind of way that they undergird under technology. These things will produce the harmful output, and these companies need to take responsibility for it.
Okay, we've taken a long time, but I've got two more quick questions. One, synthetic text extruding machine. Was that your little slap at STEM?
No, not at all.
No, that's actually very funny. I didn't even realize that until you said it.
I didn't until I heard Emily say it. I thought, STEM. Okay.
Yeah. No, and linguistics sits sort of uncomfortably at the intersection of humanities, social sciences, and natural sciences. So I'm not going to try to.
You can't get in trouble with your cousins. All right. I've got a major national linguist with us right now, so I've got to ask one last question, Dr. Bender. Oxford comma, yes.
So linguists tend to be descriptive rather than prescriptive.
Yes.
So Oxford comma, yes, there's variation on that point.
Okay.
That's great.
Love it.
I love that.
And we got it just in time. Emily Bender, Alex Hanna, thank you both so much for hanging out with us today and talking about, of course, your new book, The AI Con. Everybody should check it out here in a few weeks when it releases, May 13th, 2025.
Alex, you got to get in the habit of having it everywhere with you, always at your side.
Oh, gosh. My book bag is going to get that much heavier.
Yeah, I am still just utterly besotted with the cover, and I'm just it's still such a thrill to have the physical thing in our hands. So
the tangible quality, it feels nice even.
It's very nice.
It's really wonderful.
Thank you for the chance to help show it off some more.
Thank you so much,
Our pleasure.
Yeah, it's absolutely our pleasure, and we'll have you back again soon. Appreciate your time.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks again to our guests, Emily Bender and Alex Hanna. Of course, you can visit thecon.ai for more information about their new book and everything related to that. Also, a huge thank you to Jeff Jarvis. As always, jeffjarvis.com. You can find all his books there. If you enjoy interviews like these, we're going to be doing more of these, and they're separate from the news episodes that happen every Wednesday. So, leave a review. Let us know what you think. Apple Podcasts allows for reviews, or you can just give us a star rating on whatever your podcatcher is. It really does help. Everything you need to know about the show can be found at aiinside.show. And then finally, as a reminder, we've got our Patreon that people support us, and we really appreciate it. Patreon.com/AIinsideShow. You get ad-free episodes, a Discord community. You can get an AI Inside t-shirt by becoming an executive producer, of which we've got a lot. Dr. Dude, Jeffrey Maricini, WPVM 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina, Dante St. James, Bono De Rick, Jason Neiffer, and Jason Brady. That's 7 of you. It's amazing. Let's try and add an 8th. So thank you for your support. It enables this show to continue. We appreciate all of you, though. So thank you, and we'll see you next time on another episode of AI Inside. Bye, everybody.